All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started on this review. And so the first thing that we always want to look for is still our GCF. And so if I look for my GCF here, I have a 5, and 30. Notice that it's set equal to 0, and so we're going to continue to keep it set equal to 0 because we are solving. So I'm going to be able to take a 5, and so I have x squared plus x minus 6. And so if I take a look, I'm going to bring my 5, and I have x and x still set equal to 0. Well, what are my factors of 6? Well, we have 6 times 1, or 3 and 2. And so if I look at this, 6 and 1 will never give me 1, but 3 and 2 will. And so I'm going to use 3 and 2. If we keep the sign of our bigger number, we're going to have to make 3 positive and 2 negative. And so now I'm going to set each part equal to 0, and that includes all parts. And so 5 will never equal 0, and so that is not going to be one of our solutions. We have x plus 3 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. And so if I solve for these, I'm going to subtract 3. So I have x equals negative 3, which is a solution, and x equals 2. Okay. So now let's go ahead and look at number 3. So again, GCF. Well, what is my greatest common factor of 4, 12, and 8? It is going to be 4. And so I can take 4, and I have x squared plus 3x plus 2 equals 0. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to factor my trinomial. And so I have x and x still equals 0, still bringing that 4 down. So what are my factors of 2? Well, 2 and 1. And so I'm going to plug in 2 and 1. Well, everything's positive, so I know that everything inside my parentheses are going to be positive. And now I'm going to set each part equal to 0. So I have 4. Well, 4 will never equal 0, so we throw that 4 out. I have x plus 2 equals 0, and x plus 1 equals 0. And so if I solve, I subtract 2. I have x equals negative 2. I subtract 1 here, and I have x equals negative 1. Number 6 is going to be a little different because if we look, we don't have a GCF, okay? Because we can't take 2 from 5 or 3. We can't take 3 from them. And so now we're going to go into just factoring. And so we're going to have to look at our first term when we're looking at factors and our last term. So our first term and our last term, okay? So our factors of 2 are 2 times 1, and our factors of 3 is 3 times 1. And so I know I'm going to have a 2x here, and I'm going to have an x here. Well, now if I'm looking at my factors of 3, I can put my 3 here and my 1 here, which is going to give me 3x, 2x. Well, 3 plus 2 gives me 5x. Well, that is what we want. And so I know that all of these will be positive. So now I'm still not done, but what I need to do is set each part equal to 0. And so I have 2x plus 3 equals 0. X plus 1 equals 0. And if I go ahead and solve, I'm going to start here. So I have x equals negative 1. And I'm going to go back here. So I subtract 3 to begin. So I have 2x equals negative 3. Well, if I continue on, I'm going to divide by 2. Divide by 2. So I have x equals negative 3 halves. So that is my other solution. So same thing for number 8. Again, we cannot factor anything out. We do not have a GCF, and so I'm just going to make that clear, no GCF. What are my factors of 10 and 2? Well, my factors of 10 are going to be 10 and 1, 5 and 2. 2 is just 2 and 1. And so I'm going to start with 5x and 2x. Well, I know if I have my 2 here, I'm going to have to put 1 here, and then my other 2 here. If I go ahead and double check, I have 4x, 5x. If we keep the sign of our bigger number, -5. So I need a -5 and a +2, which would give me 4. So it would be a +4. So now if I set each part equal to 0, I have 5x plus 2 equals 0. 2x minus 1 equals 0. And if I go ahead and solve, I subtract 2. So I have 5x equals -2. Divide by 5. I have x equals -2/5. I do the same thing here, but I add 1. And so I have 2x equals 1. Divide by 2. X equals 1/2. And -2/5. And so both of these are my solutions. Okay, let's do a couple more. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys do number 9. We will do both. So the first thing I need to do is subtract my 11x, because anytime I'm solving by factoring, I have to have 0 on my right side. And so if I subtract 11x, I have 2x squared minus 11x plus 14. So again, I notice that I do not have a GCF. And so I'm going to go straight into factoring this. And so I look at my first and my last term. So my factors of 2 are 2 and 1. My factors of 14, well, I have 7 and 2, 14 and 1. That's about it. And so I know I'm going to start with 2x and x. Well, if I wanted to use 14 and 1, I could. But I actually want to go 2 and 7. And so here I have 7x. Here I have 4x. Sorry about that. My battery is running low. Well, I have a negative, but a positive here. And so if you guys remember, anytime I said that, it means that both signs will be negative. So if I have a -7 minus 4x, I get -11x. Now I set both parts equal to 0. And I have 2x minus 7 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. So if I add 2, I have x equals 2. I'm going to add 7. And so I have 2x equals 7. Divide by 2, divide by 2. X also equals 7/2. Okay. So same thing, last one I'm going to do for you guys is 13. I'm going to subtract 5x squared. And so I have -5x squared minus 3x plus 8 equals 0. The first thing I want to do is factor out a negative. And so I'm going to have -5x squared plus 3x minus 8 equals 0. Now I can go ahead and factor. So I have negative, I have 5x and x, because if I look at my factors of 5, we know it's 5 and 1. My factors of 8 are going to be a little different. We have 4 and 2, 8 and 1. So we're going to go ahead and try 4 and 2 to start. So I have 4 and 2. So we have 4x, 10x. Well, that's not going to give me 3x. And so I'm actually going to erase that. And we're going to try 8 and 1. So now I have 8x and 5x. Well, if I keep the sign of my bigger number, my 8 has to be positive. Let me try that again. My 8 has to be positive, my 1 has to be negative. Still set equal to 0. And so if I go ahead and set each part equal to 0. Well, a negative 1 will never equal 0, so we throw that out. And then we have 5x plus 8 equals 0. And we have x minus 1 equals 0. Well, if I add 1, x will be 1. And x will also be negative 8/5. Okay, hopefully this helps. Make sure you study. If you still need help, come into tutoring.